What is going on, everybody? I'm back for another video. Today I have the Ferronaut. This is a creation by Goodwyn. If you guys have not had a chance to talk to him, he is a very, very cool gentleman to speak to. Very nice. He's very funny too, and apparently he makes really, really good knives. Is what I've experienced in like my almost last 2 weeks of utilizing and carrying this knife, the Ferronaut. So if you guys had a chance to talk to him, definitely do so. He's known as That Piece here on YouTube. And man, he can really make a knife. Anyways, this is not my knife, obviously. This is Chris's knife, and he has generously loaned it to me for test and review. So thank you very much, Chris. I know you said I could keep this a little longer, but I feel like because it is not my knife, and I have put it through its paces in the last 2 weeks or so, and it is, I'll just have to say, this is a very good knife. Let's just get into the review. I can stop my rambling here for a second because you probably want to hear all about the knife. So I'm just going to stick this right here in the middle. It's going to be on this line. Every 2 squares is 1 inch. That's going to pop up my usual suspects here on the tabletop, which is the XM18 and, of course, the Para 2. Two knives that are kind of dichotomy in terms of design. I want to say that Chris's creation has pretty much the near slicing ability of the Para 2 while maintaining the excellent hard nature and overbuilt nature of the XM18, if that gives you any indication of how this review is going to turn out. Let's go and start with a brief overview. First of all, I have no clue what steel Chris used in this, but whatever steel it is, it held a very nice edge, and it still is. I haven't sharpened this knife, by the way, in my 2 weeks of cutting with it consistently. It is very, very good. I'm going to assume it's S30V. So we got titanium handles, very nice frame lock, 3D mill pocket clip, 2 barrel spacers, an internal stop pin, and ball bearings. So that is Chris's Ferronaut in a nutshell. So let's talk about my experiences. The very first thing I'm going to address is the lock bar. Now, most knife makers, when they make a knife, and this may be a poor example just because, well, I'll get into it here. Whenever you go to deploy a frame locking knife, sometimes, occasionally, when the lock bar is, about the half the size of the scale, your fingers rest on it, which means that when you go to pop it down, if you're holding on to the knife too hard, you can't deploy a knife. Now, on the XM18, the reason why I say this is a poor example is because all the older generations of XM18s, they have really weak detent. I can actually push down on the bar and still get the knife to deploy. So now Chris has his lock bar set at a very harsh detent, which is actually perfect, I must add, for this particular knife. And because he managed to make a very thin lock bar here, when you're holding onto this knife, your fingers don't even rest on the lock bar, just rest on this giant pocket clip, and which means that even when you're holding it really harshly, you can still get the knife to deploy just because he's got a pocket clip in the way, he's angled the lock bar out of the way, and your fingers never really rest on the lock bar to push down. Now, if I was to intentionally push down the lock bar, I can't deploy the knife. But, if you're just holding it like normal like this, it comes out really, really quickly. Obviously, lefties, no problems there because your fingers will never be on the lock bar anyways. I don't know if Chris did this on purpose, but something I just noticed. Really nice. Onto the pocket clip. Now, this made me a little nervous at first when I looked at the pocket clip. You notice how thin this material is, and you can intentionally bend it out. And when I slipped this in my pocket, it was obviously riding like this because my slacks had thicker materials in certain places, like reinforced pockets kind of a thing, right? And it was like this, and I was like, oh man, is this going to be like where like if you keep it in this position, it's just going to bend the clip out and it'll never bend back in, but not so. So after 2 weeks of carrying it, it's still a lot of tension left. And the way he designed this clip, it has a very nice relief here, so it does slip in and out. Even thicker materials. I still can't deny that this does still make me a little nervous, but nothing has happened. The pocket clip still has tension, and it's just easy to slip in and out of your pockets. And I love a nice 3D milled clip, and this is no exception. Very, very nicely done. The other thing I might add is that the construction of this, if you guys watched my takedown video, very cool. It's a non-over-engineered construction, meaning that there's just 2 barrel spacers, which you don't even have to take out. You can just simply take these 2 screws out and then take the pivot out and then lift the whole locking side off of it. And the knife comes apart. I mean, this is perfect. It's so simple. 30 seconds to take down, you know, and then if you don't clean it, 30 seconds to put back together, if at the most, and then adjust it a little bit, the pivot a little bit, and you get your blade dead centered, and you know, it rockets out. So even an idiot like me can take this down, put it back together, and it still goes together just perfectly. This is like, it's like a Chris Reeve Sabenza, basically, that you can torque down the pivot and adjust it just a tiny bit, and everything just goes back perfectly together. You know, the tolerances are really, really nice. And after you put it back together, there is no blade plate. Yep, no blade plate at all. And that's me putting it back together myself. All right, so very awesome there. All right, next thing I'll talk about is, let's talk about the slight details here. Now, the one detail I did not talk about in my unboxing video, and first impressions video, is his maker's mark. Now, I wish more makers would do this. This is it, right on the pivot pin there. You see like a C and a G melded together, and it's very nice because you don't have to billboard up the blade. You don't have to put any writing on the handles, not on the spine. You know, this is such a classy, understated way to put a maker's mark on a knife. I absolutely love it. Any makers, manufacturers out there who are not doing this, please start doing this. It is very nice, nicely done, because I don't need to see all this, you know, stuff all over the blades. It keeps the blade nice and sterile, and to what it's supposed to be doing, which is cutting in the first place. All right, onto the lock bar tab. The lock bar tab is extremely well done. This is nicely jimped, and the way Chris angled it, it's very, very ergonomic too. So if you're holding a knife, you take it out of your pockets like this, you know, considering it doesn't matter if you're right or left-handed. When you drop your finger on it, it's just right here. And then all you gotta do is you just gotta press down, even pull back on it a little bit, and it just rockets straight out. The deployment is just rock solid. Look how fast that comes out. I don't know how well this translates because I am wearing a microphone, but the lock up here, let me get a little closer to the knife, put the microphone here, hang on here. You hear that? It is just extremely nice lockup sound. It's every bit the lockup sound you could ever want from a knife, really. Solid, and when you hear that sound, you know this knife is not going anywhere in terms of it ever folding on you. It is just perfect. He has this dialed in just perfectly. The action, the D10 is very harsh, but that's fine because it breaks really, really well. And the minute it breaks, there's no doubt about it, this will lock up 100% of the time. I have never once gotten this blade to fail. I mean, as long as you don't have the blade in the way of something else when you're flipping it out, this blade will never fail to deploy and lock up 100% of the time. Now, the other thing I didn't get a chance to show you on my unboxing or my disassembly video is that Chris has, which I won't be able to show you now, but if you go back and watch my disassembly video, on the lock bar tab face, there's a little pin, and it's been, I'm assuming it's welded or something to the lock bar face, but it allows Chris to do fine minor adjustments, I assume, to tune in the the way it contacts with the tang. And it's a very, in my mind, an innovative and ingenious way of doing that, because lockup is so nice. There's like, you know, he just did it just perfectly. I mean, I know I sound like a little gushing schoolgirl right now because I'm, you know, this is kind of purely like geekiness over knives, but you can't deny this. It's just such a nice, you know, innovative way of doing and tuning a lockup. So hats off to you there, Chris. Otherwise, the knife is just extremely well made. I just can't get over how nice it is. Now the blade reminds me of the Ferronaut from years ago by David Mosher. Same kind of a grind pattern, just a little bit not as tall blade, but you know, it's a very utilitarian shaped blade. Now, it is a little dirty. I'm sorry. I'll get this cleaned off before I send it back, Chris. So let's talk about my experience with the blade. Now, I will have to caveat this. The blade is extremely thick. It's a very tough blade up here. I mean, the stock is just, I mean, let's see here. By comparison, if you look at the XM18, which is heralded as a very tough blade and thick stock blade, you can tell it pretty much, you know, makes it look like a thin piece of aluminum. So this is a very thick blade, and you can't deny that it does suffer a little bit because of that thickness, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Now, for food prep, it is very awesome. I use this to cut an entire green pepper. I use it to cut an entire onion. I used it to even slice up my food. Maybe I'll just get some photos in there. I was actually at work, I was using this to cut up my burrito. Man, that was a really damn good burrito. And it worked just fine, obviously. And the tip is extremely usable, just because this is basically like an X-Acto knife up here. It's a lot thinner, and because of the hollow ground, it's an excellent slicer. Now, with that being said, when I was doing some breaking down some cardboard for recycling, will say that if you're more or less going to be using the middle part of it, because I'm just push cutting basically for cardboard. And if there's a really long piece of cardboard that you're cutting down, like say a flap of a box, and that to prep for a further breakdown, this does hang in certain places, so it will get caught. But luckily, because Chris knows how to sharpen a knife, it's extremely sharp. All you gotta do is give it a little bit more muscle, just get into the cut. It goes right through it, but it does get caught. So it is attributed to the very thickness of the blade. But as it stands already, he has done kind of a very nice job of grinding this knife to a certain point where it's kind of like over the average of what most knives are used for. For example, you would use a pair of two for its slicing capabilities, but you would not use it for prying. You would not use it for any kind of tougher job. At least I wouldn't, just because the blade is so thin. It just thins out, And while you probably could, I wouldn't. It's just not designed for that. By the same token, you would not use the XM18 for fine cutting tasks, because let's face it, this is not really used for fine cutting tasks. Chris has managed to hit that kind of golden medium where you can actually use it for finer cutting tasks as well as harder cutting tasks. So it's kind of like an all-around usable blade, and he has done a very good job with that. But at the same time, it is very thick, so there are certain cutting tasks that it will suffer a little bit, especially if you start using it up here somewhere. But other than that, still a very cool blade, very nice usable blade shape, and obviously a very good slicer. Going to ergonomics here. Okay, so this knife shines in terms of ergonomics. If you can see how the knife falls in the palm of my hand, it's like perfect. I mean, there's no hot spots, there's no empty spaces where I wish that it would fill the hand. This is well, first of all, it's a very thick knife, as you can tell there, but you chamfered it around the edges, so it gives you a little bit more comfortable grip, because it's wide in the middle, and then of course it thins a little bit toward the edges here. So when you're gripping down on this knife, it just feels so nice. And even in the reverse grip, which I don't really use, and not like I'm slicing up cardboard boxes Shinobi style or something like that, but it's every bit very comfortable, and rightfully so. If you can look at the way the handle is angled, it is a very soft flowing curves, and very conducive to good ergonomics. Now, there are no jimping on here aside from on the lock bar tab here, which is fine because there's a flipper there holding your fingers in. Otherwise, you would be cutting your own fingers off because you would slide, because it is rather slippery too, even with these milled holes in here. But other than that, luckily there's a flipper tab, and when you're holding onto this is perfect. Let's take a quick look at the holes, milled holes here. It has a two-tone effect on there where it's polished in the middle, and I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, it's polished in the middle. And then, of course, you got this nice stonewash finishing on the TI, and just overall very nice looking utilitarian knife. This is a hard-working knife, guys. It's not a beauty queen. It's not meant to be kept in a safe. You buy this knife from Chris, you'll want to use it. It is really, really good. And of course, obviously, the action, as I mentioned, it's just beyond comparison. It's just such a nice action. Now, I will say that it's not like the most smoothest drop shutty blade, you know what I mean? But it just drops shut if you give it a little bit of a downward motion. But just the break and the a lockup, I mean, this is a solid knife. I mean, it's perfect. So I have to give Chris A+ marks on this. Now, I will say that given my current infatuation with smaller knives and more gentlemanly looking knives, this is not exactly what I would carry in terms of size and the way it looks, just because this is my personal taste. There's nothing against what Chris has created. I can't deny this is a very good knife. But at the same time, I will say it's a little bit big and it's a little bit heavy for my daily usage. It's very thick. And when I was putting this in my pockets, it did bang against my leg a little bit, so I had to switch it to a different pocket. I wear 5'11" tactical pants, so there's a smaller pocket on the front that you can just slip it right in, and it kind of alleviated that issue for me at least. But, if you don't mind carrying big, heavy knives, this is it. You want like something thinner, more average, this is, it dwarfs it. It completely does. I mean, so... yeah, but definitely a really nicely built knife. Okay, so just to sum up everything that I've talked about, and just to sum up everything that Chris's knife has is to me, let's put it that way, in my interpretation of it. Let's put it this way: I have in my hand the the M-Custa Galaxy, very nice, very small, a very petite gentleman's folder, which I'll put right there. Now, if I was to classify that knife in a hammer, this would be it. This is a little hammer. That's a little petite hammer that's meant to take links out of a watch. In fact, I'll put it down like this with my pinky up. There you go. So that would be the M-Custa Galaxy. Now, if you want to use something a little bit more serious, you'd probably go with the Para 2. Now, this is, again, has a very fine blade, very good for slicing, a little bit thinner, and a little bit tougher, obviously, than the Galaxy. I'll put that down right here. For this one, I would probably use this. This would be the representation of the Para 2. Slightly tougher hammer, a little bit more on the petite side, and, no need for having a pinky up, but we'll just put that down right there. Now, moving on, you'd think I would talk about Chris's knife, but no. I'll say the next knife in the lineup would be the XM18. Slightly thicker, more robust, maybe not as a good slicer for delicate fine work, but, nonetheless, a very nice knife. And, you would classify that with this. All right, slightly bigger hammer, and you got a little bit more robustness. So essentially what I'm saying is this hammer really can't do what this hammer does down here, but each of these knives have their own kind of characteristics, right? Now, we come to the Ferronaut, which is Chris Goodwyn's creation. I'm going to set that down right here. So in terms of Chris's creation, he has managed to create a knife that basically is represented, if I can put this up, by this. Okay. Okay, so Chris has created a knife that has all the characteristics of this over here. But at the same time, he managed to make a blade geometry and grind that actually can do finer work. So it's a very interesting kind of a, I don't know, kind of a dichotomy of aspects, if you will, in terms of how the knife performs. The blade can do every bit this gigantic sledgehammer can do, but it can do even finer cutting tasks that this tiny little hammer can do. So that is what Chris has created, and this is the best way I can sum everything up in this video. So anyways, that's the end of my review. Thank you so much for loaning this out to me, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and also getting a chance to experience one of your creations. I'm so sad to actually have to send this back to you, but I have to. Maybe in the future I will definitely have to take you up and put an order in and get something of one of your creations, because you can absolutely make a fantastic knife, Chris. So again, thank you for loaning that out to me. Again, everybody, if you have any questions or comments, you know where to leave your comments, obviously, down below. Aside from that, take care, have a nice day, and I'll catch you all on the next one.